Now, how can the Freedom of Information Act be used? We have used FOIA extensively in the case of Leonard Pelletier. Leonard Pelletier is a Native American activist. He was a member of the American Indian movement, and he was framed by the FBI in 1970. Actually, his trial occurred in 1977, but he was framed for the murder of 2 FBI agents that occurred on June 26, 1975 at the Jumping Bull property in Pine Ridge, South Dakota. Now, Leonard Pelletier, as I mentioned earlier, was tried in 1977 in Fargo, North Dakota for shooting 2 FBI agents. Now, at the time Leonard Pelletier was tried in 1977, the prosecution merely turned over 3,500 pages of material and told defense attorneys this is all we have. Now, what we learned through FOIA, in 1979, October 12, 1979, John Privatera brought a lawsuit on Leonard Peltier's behalf in the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia. And as a result of that FOIA lawsuit, we learned that the government had 18,000 pages of material. They withheld 6,000 pages in their entirety. They released 12,000 pages in full or in part. Now, the 6,000 pages withheld in full were withheld on national security grounds. But I would note the 18,000 pages are a far cry from the 3,500 pages turned over in 1977. Now, in 2002, we submitted a new round of FOIA requests on behalf of Leonard Pelletier to the FBI. And as a result of these requests, we learned that the FBI had, across the country, 142,579 pages of material pertaining to Leonard Pelletier and Resmers. Resmers was the name given to its investigation into the deaths of the 2 agents. The Minneapolis field office of the FBI alone had 77,149 pages. 66,594 pages were released in full or in part. 10,000 pages, over 10,000 pages, 10,555 pages were withheld in their entirety under various FOIA exemptions. Now, that's it's incredible how many more pages that were unearthed. This is material that should have been turned over at the time of Leonard's 1977 trial. And the FBI, nearly 36 years later, is still fighting to keep this from us and Leonard Pelletier. But we've already, because of the FOIA documents, we found out all types of things. There were ballistic reports withheld. There was information regarding an individual. Here's one of the documents we obtained regarding an individual who was arrested with Leonard Pelletier, was never extradited back to the States. There's another document we secured with minimal redactions. And here's some additional pages. Actually, here's an example of some of the documents. They have minimal excisions. And just to give you an example of some of the material they withheld, a lot of times the material is withheld not because it would harm national security or reveal the identity of a confidential source, but it would in fact embarrass the agency. Now, here's a teletype we secured under FOIA from the FBI. And this is dated August 7th, 1975. It's from the director of the FBI, and it's to the special agent in charge for Chicago, FBI field office. Here's quoting from page 3. This document, I might note, is marked confidential with a line through it. And previous versions of this document had been redacted. But here's the second paragraph from the top. One night, former actor Marlon Brando was present. flying in via private jet to airstrip in Mission, South Dakota, and leaving the next day. Brando mingled with Russell Means, Swift Talk, Tyon, Bellacourt, got drunk, and seemed primarily interested in having sexual relations with young Indian girls, several of whom were supplied to him. His appearance was described as looking like a bum, in quotation marks. But this is the kind of stuff we unearth. This is the kind of stuff the FBI's been fighting for years to keep from us. And if you know, the American people, Lord knows what's in those 10,555 pages. This is probably just a sample of what's there. But this is your tax dollars at work. Now, another case where we've used FOIA extensively was with Occupy Buffalo. Now, we submitted FOIA requests to the FBI, Department of Homeland Security, and as a result of these requests, we learned that both the FBI and the U.S. Coast Guard had Occupy Buffalo under surveillance. The FBI, we filed a request. The FBI dragged their feet on our request. We filed an administrative appeal. We then brought a lawsuit in the U.S. District Court for the Western District of New York, which is in Buffalo. We've now learned that the FBI they claim there's only 5 pages, and at the time this interview is being taped, which is November 28th, 2012, the case is still pending. We'll be litigating. There'll be updates in 2013, first part of the year, with some luck. Now, I would note various states, most states, there's a few notable exceptions, but most states have a law that's similar to the Federal Freedom of Information Act. In fact, the state of New York has what they call the Freedom of Information Law, so it's FOIA as opposed to FOIA. And the laws, and you'd have to check your state statute, have some similarities. New York's is modeled after the federal statute. Wyoming has a law, South Dakota has a law, but they're very, very weak. California has a pretty good statute. Massachusetts, their statute isn't that great. But at the state level, it's the same process. You make the request. In some instances, you have an appeal process. New York has such a process. I know Wyoming doesn't. Don't ask me why, but I've been making requests under the Wyoming statute. South Dakota is terrible. I've attempted to secure documents in that state. Very weak statute. But here in New York, we use the state Freedom of Information law to help a local activist, Nate Buckley. He has a case pending in Buffalo City Court. It's a criminal case. And Nate Buckley's case, much like Leonard Pelletier, you have an instance where the prosecution hasn't turned over everything to defense attorneys, and the Freedom of Information statute has helped us. Now, in theory, prosecutors are required to produce all information in their possession, including information maintained by law enforcement. Now, in Nate Buckley's case, as a result of a FOIA request we submitted, we learned that the Niagara Frontier Transit Authority has 37 documents that they will not turn over to defense attorneys. In addition, they turned over 71 pages of material. 42 pages were contained redactions. Now, this is material that should have been turned over to Nate's defense attorneys ages ago. If it wasn't for FOIA, we would have never learned about these documents. But as a result of this FOIA request, we learned that one of the officers who arrested Nate Buckley and actually pepper sprayed him on April 8th, 2011 was the subject of an investigation by the New York State Inspector General. In fact, this investigation was launched in May of 2011. Now, this information was concealed from Nate Buckley, the public, and defense attorneys. And again, if it wasn't for the state Freedom of Information statute, we wouldn't have learned of this. So the FOIA, very important tool. And never lose sight of it, never give up. You know, you just keep pounding away, and eventually you'll liberate some documents that can help. In fact, in Nate Buckley's case, I'm convinced that as a result of our efforts through the state Freedom of Information law, we will be successful in having all charges dismissed against Mr. Buckley.